Lawyers for former President Trump have requested the judge overseeing the Mar-a-Lago documents case postpone the trial until after the election. They argue Trump's candidacy could make it difficult to seat an impartial jury. In a separate matter, a group of grand jurors in Georgia may soon consider charges against the former president. Former President Trump and his allies who sought to overturn the Senate's 2020 election results are the center of that case. Trump lost both Georgia and the presidential election that year. Fulton County's district attorney indicated that the former president could be indicted early next month. Nikole Killion joins me now for more on all of this from Atlanta. Nikole, wind us back here a little bit and remind us how we got here.
Well, we got here with that now infamous phone call that pretty much the world heard, where former President Trump called Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger in the weeks after the 2020 election and asked him to find the votes, hoping to overturn President Biden's victory here in the state. That's what sparked this investigation by Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis. And through the course of that investigation, a special purpose grand jury was convened last spring of 22. It just wrapped up its work at the beginning of this year. That panel heard evidence. They called in a number of witnesses, including many of the former president's close allies, from Mark Meadows to Rudy Giuliani and others. And then that special purpose grand jury, which was strictly an investigative body, put forth a report. Parts of that were unsealed again earlier this year. And what the grand jury found was that they found no widespread evidence of election fraud in the state. And secondly, they also believed that there were several witnesses that may have committed perjury, and they recommended that the district attorney seek appropriate indictments. And that's what brings us to this moment, where you now have two regular grand juries that were impaneled today that will serve 2-month terms. One of those juries is likely to now hear some of this evidence from the district attorney and will ultimately have the power to decide whether or not to indict the former president.
And what was it like in the courtroom?
You know, it was really interesting because, of course, when we hear about grand juries, often the process seems so secretive. But to actually be in the room, you know, here in Georgia, it's a fairly open process where media, reporters like myself, were able to sit in the grand jury room along with the rest of the jurors. You almost felt like a juror, quite frankly, because the district attorney was there, Fani Willis. So was one of the presiding judges, Robert McBurney, and he was giving instructions on how the process would work. So from that standpoint, you really got a sense of what it would like to be in the jurors' shoes, if you will. We found out they get paid only $25 a day. Most of the process today was really about figuring out who was going to be up to the task, who could serve, who has a conflict or, you know, an obligation where they won't be able to fulfill this 2-month term, where they'll be serving for 2 days at a time per week. And so that was the process that we went through today. Unlike a trial jury, you know, we did not see lawyers from both sides come in and try to ask the jurors questions about whether or not they may be biased. For instance, in this case, it was strictly about whether or not these jurors were available, could do the job, yes or no. If they could, they basically were allowed to stay. Ultimately, we saw 23 jurors that were selected for each panel, along with 3 alternates, again, who will fulfill now this 2-month term.
And so finally, what is the next step after today?
So now that these grand juries have been seated, and keep in mind, even though a lot of the attention is on the former president and certainly these potential charges that he may face related to this 2020 election interference investigation, you know, these grand juries are taking up all kinds of cases. So it's not just the Trump case. So it's likely that they will hear other cases first before they get to the Trump case. The district attorney has laid out a pretty strict timetable in the sense that she did say that she would likely announce a charging decision this summer, and she has narrowed that window to a timetable between July 31st and August 18th, where she says her staff will be working remotely and where she has asked judges not to schedule any trials. So that potentially could be the window where she presents that evidence and announces a charging decision based on what this grand jury returns. John.
Nikole Killion in Atlanta, Georgia. Thank you so much, Nikole.
You bet.